Those of you who've been to Western countries, the United States particularly, will have noticed when you drive down freeways, there's congested traffic, heavy traffic in most lanes, except one lane. And what is that lane called? Sorry? HOV. HOV lane. HOV lane is called high occupancy vehicle lane. Okay? So when you get into, what it means is, if in your car you have 2 or more people, you can move on to the HOV lane. And it's such a pleasure to drive in that lane because every other lane is totally congested and you move effortlessly, smoothly to your destination well in time. The Gita puts you in the HOV lane in life. You don't have to just accept what I'm saying. But as we often say, Vedanta, the knowledge of the Gita, is a science, which means it can be experimented upon, it can be tried out in your own life and accepted only when you are convinced that it is true. So yesterday we spoke of excellence. And that excellence comes from 3 attitudes, 3 kinds of approaches to life. And that is sincerity of action, purity of heart, clarity of thought. Wow, you people are the best audience I've ever had. So, now today let's take a look at action. How action puts you in the fast lane to success, in the HOV lane. So, sincerity of action is a shift from what you are doing to why are you doing it? For what are you doing it? Are you doing it only for yourself? Then the highest action, the supposedly top-end action, becomes very poor quality action. And so therefore you don't get the success, you don't get happiness, you don't get anything. Krishna, throughout the Gita, keeps saying this. He's addressing Arjuna, but through Arjuna he's getting at all of us. He's saying, why are you doing what you're doing? Na siddhim, na sukham, na param gatim. With this self-centered, selfish attitude towards life, you won't even get success. Forget about happiness. It's a myth to believe that you can achieve success or prosperity through selfishness. And the sooner you smash this myth, the better it is for you. It's a myth to believe that you will be happy through selfishness. The sooner you overcome this, the better it is for you. And so, when you act in life, the Gita says that you can act with one of 2 attitudes. Either with the attitude of taking, grabbing, or with the attitude of giving, contributing. We all know that we ought to function with this attitude of giving. This is not new to any of us. But the problem is we're not able to implement it. And we're not able to implement it because we don't understand it in entirety. The moment we speak of giving, you recoil in fear. My God, what do I have to give now? You don't have to give anything. You just have to think of giving. We're all focusing on acts of giving. Nobody in the world wants your acts of giving. But just the thought of giving. Why can't you even think of it? Why do you have to be so tight-fisted about even your thoughts? So, see, in every sphere of activity, you don't have to change your action, you don't have to change the field of activity, you simply have to think, stretch your mental resources to accommodate the interests of others. Whether you are the secretary of a building society or the CEO of a company or an ordinary citizen of the city or nation. It has nothing to do with how important a role you have to play or how small a role that you're playing. It has something to do with just the attitude. You know, the other day I got a call from a person in Bangalore saying, I have this huge temple, I have so much of land, and I have spent 3 crores on the construction of a new temple, a new whatever it is. And the grand opening is going to be in few months' time. And after giving this long story, and all the celebrities of India are coming to Bangalore for the inauguration. And then he says, I want you to come and give a lecture. But quickly he says, but I have no money to give. I can't give a donation. And I felt so sorry for him that I actually told him, don't worry, I'll send you a check by courier as my donation towards you because you're so poor that you can't give. Without asking, he says, no, I can't give. This is what we mean, the attitude of grabbing, you know. You want to then go boast to people that, oh, I have so-and-so coming, so-and-so coming, so-and-so coming. But I'm not going to pay them. I said, who asked you in the first place? I don't ask because people don't want to give. And there's no point in extracting money from people who don't have this attitude of giving. And yet, today, this morning, there was a young student from a college here in South Bombay who went out of his way to call me. You know, we have these youth programs, a 3-day workshop for young people, young adults between the ages of 18 and 30. And we were looking for a suitable venue in South Bombay. I don't know how this young man got to know of it. I hadn't asked him. Nobody had asked him. He went well out of his way. And he, mind you, he's just a student. What resources could he have before him? But it's the spirit, it's the attitude of giving. And he did it. He called me, he took me to the place, he introduced me to the person in charge there, he showed me the venue, everything was perfect. They called this afternoon and confirmed, they said, tomorrow morning we'll confirm it. In fact, thanks to this one young student, one young man who has this attitude of giving, perhaps we'll be able to have a youth program in South Bombay. We've already announced one in Juhu in December. But this is it. You don't have to be wealthy for the attitude of giving. You don't have to have a great amount of resources or connections or contacts or networking or any such thing. You simply have to have this attitude of giving. And nobody wants to stretch. See, he didn't have to do very much. He just had to connect 2 people that he knew to make a wonderful thing happen, because he himself feels that these values should be communicated to young adults. Now the question is, why can't you do this? I'm not suggesting you go looking for halls, please. That's not the thing. And not even for us. For anybody. For a neighbor. For a relative. You know, there are people who can't stretch even for their own children. There was a lady who came fuming, fretting and fuming the other day saying, I'm constantly fighting with my 17-year-old son. I said, what? Fighting with your son? Now, if you are in a situation where you're fighting with your own son, who will you not fight with? If you can't feel that sense of oneness with your own children, that you have to badger them and get after them and then go complaining that you're fighting with your children, then who are you going to give to is the question. So, this is just an attitude of giving. Now, what the Gita asks us to do is, both the choices are available to you. Attitude of grabbing, taking, going for freebies, going for discounts, negotiating and beating down somebody on his price. Or having an attitude of giving. You operate with both. Both are accessible to you. Both are available to you. And see what happens for yourself. Experience what it is to grab, take. That you're experiencing all the time. Experience what it is to give. Again, we're saying you don't have to give anything. Just the thought. There's a gentleman here, a very fine person. Every time he drives a car, he thinks the roads are made for the pedestrians. The pedestrian must have right of way. And when he's a pedestrian, he thinks the people in cars have right of way. Whereas we have the opposite. When you're driving, see, all of us are pedestrians sometime. When we're driving, when we're in a car, we think, I should have right of way. And when we are crossing the road to go somewhere, we think the pedestrian should have the right of way. But to think that the other person has the right of way and to yield is a sign of refinement. So now the question arises that in spite of knowing that we should function with the attitude of giving, why is it so difficult? What you need to think is, why am I not giving? Let's take a few reasons that we give, excuses actually. One person says, it's painful to give. It is. Initially, it's painful. But as we saw yesterday, that which gives you pain in the present, momentary pain, gives you everlasting happiness. Once you taste the joy of giving, you will never go back to taking. Second thing, there's a class, we have these weekly classes, you must have been told about it. Every Wednesday here at Prempuri Ashram, every Tuesday at Bandra, and every Sunday morning at Prabhadevi. So you don't have a chance to escape. Some people say, oh, what to do evenings, I work late. Then Sunday morning. Then they say, no, weekends I have to spend with my family. Then weekdays. So anyway, we have these classes. At one of these classes, before I could finish saying giving, one lady jumped at me. She said, oh, but I'm so busy doing so many things at work, and I have to come home and look after my family and children and all that. There's no time. What would you say to that? No time for what? We're not asking you to give your time. We're not asking you to set aside resources. We're not asking you to do any such thing. The Gita simply says, attitude, shift in attitude. And you don't need time for a shift in attitude. You only need the will to do it. So that's smashed. Next is, someone else says, oh, but if I start giving, the whole world will take me for a ride. Then what will happen to me? Examine that statement. Look around you. The fact of the case is that nobody in the world wants to take from a giver. The only way of understanding it is indiscriminately give and see what happens. In the United States, one of the most difficult things is cooking, because everyone has to cook themselves. They don't have a Maharaj like you and me, to come and cook. So when they have a party, it's impossible for one person to cook for everyone. So what they do is, they get together and each one brings a dish. And notice this time in San Francisco, there was a lady who apparently constantly dodges and gives some reason or the other why she should not bring a dish. And in the same group, there's another lady. Now this lady who cheats in the sense, it's an innocent thing. She doesn't like to work, so she doesn't bring a dish. All the others get together and say, now punishment for you. Next time you have to bring 2 dishes. On the other hand, in the same group, there's one lady who's assigned one particular dish and she brings 3 dishes. She has this tremendous attitude of giving in every sense of the term, but when it comes to food, definitely she has. So to her, they tell her, next time, whatever her name is, she said, you don't bring anything. If you bring anything, you're disqualified. You'll have to go home. So the truth of the matter is, nobody likes to take from a giver. Everybody wants to take from a taker. So that is also smashed. And in the end, you benefit the most. So there is no such thing as sacrifice. Remember that. When you sacrifice for someone else, the person who benefits the most is you, not the recipient of your service. I mean, the recipient also benefits, but the greatest person who benefits is you yourself. And there is a fantastic story, a real life situation, which gets this message across. There was a father, parents, a young couple. Their child was born, and something went wrong during delivery, and he was born handicapped. So he wasn't responding to anything, and the doctors told them, so you better institutionalize. When the child was 11 months old, the doctors told them that you better institutionalize him because you're going to find it difficult taking care of him. But this young couple decided not to allow, they fought institutionalizing the child. And they went to a university and said, why don't you give him something by which he can communicate with us? Give him a computer, give him a way of this. And they said, no chance. There's nothing going on in his brain. Then the couple told them, said, there's nothing going on in the brain? Take a chance. Tell him a joke and see what happens. So the doctors told a joke to this child, who for all practical purposes was totally like a vegetable. And he laughed. And then they convinced these university people that, look, you have to do something for him. So they made a computer and they made a device by just the pressure with his forehead, a particular part of his head which he could move. He began to type out on the computer and communicate with his father, with his parents. And thus it was that he was sent to school. Now in school, there was an accident and a boy was paralyzed. So they had a fundraising race for him. And this child, the little boy, typed out to his father that how nice it would be. When I saw this race, when I saw people running, for the first time in my life, it gave me great joy. For the first time in my life, I did not feel handicapped. And the father saw this look of joy on the son's face and decided that he's going to race with him. So he put him in a wheelchair and decided to run a race. Now this father hadn't run at all in his life. He hadn't walked more than a mile. And how is he going to run 6.5 miles? But he did it. And at the end of it, the father says, I felt handicapped for the first time in my life. But then this father and son team did the marathon, which is 26.2 miles, 85 times. He pushed his disabled son in the wheelchair. And then he went for what they call as triathlon, means running, swimming, cycling. So this father, who had never run in his life, who did not know how to swim, and who hadn't cycled since he was 6 years old, ended up winning race after race with his son. And then he did it so well that everybody told him, why don't you do it alone? He said, that's impossible. I can't do it alone, because that which motivates me to come up with this superlative performance is the smile on my son's face. So why I'm telling you all this story is, when you act in a spirit of giving, when you function with just this thought of giving, miraculously you transcend your own barriers, you rise above your own limitations, and you come up with absolutely fantastic, breathtaking performances. This capacity is there in each one of us. It doesn't matter whether you're talented, you're gifted, you're intelligent, or you're literate or illiterate. This capacity, every one of us has. And anyone in the world who has functioned with this attitude of giving has achieved fantastic results. Remember, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was an ordinary student. There was nothing extraordinary about him. But what made that ordinary student, an ordinary man, into an extraordinary Mahatma who went down in history? The 137 years after him, a movie has created a worldwide stir about him, is the fact that he rose above his selfish, self-centered interests and decided to work for the nation. Now you tell me who benefited more, the nation or him? And you think of examples that multiply. On the other hand, there are great geniuses, very, very intelligent people with fabulous academic records, PhD and MBA and this, that and the other from the best universities. Their performance and their next door neighbor doesn't know them. How do you account for that? So from this, both the positives and the negatives, you learn one thing in life, that if you want to prosper, if you want to be happy, if you want to break free of your own limitations, you have to be able to rally your thoughts around a cause that is greater than yourself. If you don't do that, Hanta, says the Upanishad. Hanta means alas. What a pity. What a tragedy that a human being of such tremendous potential allows himself or herself to go down the drain because of selfish thought. It's not selfish action, selfish thought. So, the attitude of giving is what we're talking about, not acts of giving. Even when we perform worship, even in the field of religion and spirituality, we are all focusing on acts of worship rather than attitude. It's all about which temple did you go to, what puja did you do, what fast did you do. And that too, fast has become a joke now. Yesterday, I heard a lady, she was talking to me. She said, I hear your lectures are starting from today. I said, yes. I'm sorry I can't come because I'm doing, what is that? You all know what it is. Fast. And then she told me what it was. She thought I didn't know. She said, we fast so that we get the same husband for 7 janmas. I said, oh, I see. And then the next sentence she says, I can't come because there is a party to celebrate Karwa Chauth. I said, party? And what do you eat there? All the best food in the world. So then I asked her, I said, who's supposed to fast, you or your husband? Acts of worship. Person who's truly dedicated doesn't have to do any such thing. Doesn't have to fast once a year, because then every year of her life, every moment of her life is dedicated to the husband's welfare. Then why do this additional thing? Not that you should not, but that's what it is. And we all focus on acts of giving, yet the highest forms of giving that have been immortalized were that of Shabari, this mad tribal woman, mad with a love for Ram, where she wanted to give her entire life to Ram and had nothing to give except wild berries. And that too, she wanted to make sure that every one of them was sweet. So she tasted it before offering it to the Lord. And the Lord accepted it. He didn't say, this is jutha, I don't want. He didn't say, this is dirty from a tribal woman. He accepted it wholeheartedly. That's what the Gita says. It says, if you offer whatever it is that you're offering, it's not what you offer that matters. It's not what you do that matters. It is how you do it, with what attitude you do it, that matters. And if you do it with the right attitude, it says, Ashnami prayatatmanaha. It says, I will accept it. Whatever it is. The highest forms of giving are Shabari. The highest examples of giving are Sudama, who gave just a handful of poha, beaten rice. And Krishna accepted it so delightfully and enjoyed it so thoroughly. Nothing in his palace, none of the luxurious things that there were in his environment, in his surroundings, matched with this poha that Sudama gave. So, now where does the attitude of taking come from? The attitude of taking comes from a sense of deficiency, lack. You see, all of us have this oppressive sense of deficiency, that I lack this, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have a million things. And when I don't have so many things and my focus is on fulfilling these desires, how can I think of giving? This is the problem. So what the Gita says is, in order to function with an attitude of giving, first you must shift from this lack to a sense of abundance. Abundance, be aware of the bounty that has been given to you unasked for, of the blessings that you are enjoying this moment, this minute. And when you get into that, when you get into this feeling of acknowledging the gifts that you have been given, unasked for, unpaid for definitely, unacknowledged, ungrateful for. And when you begin to understand all of this, then you stop complaining, you stop thinking about what you don't have, because what you don't, the truth is that what you don't have, you really don't need. But this wretched mind of ours has this tendency to zero in, to set aside everything that you have and zero in on one or two things that you don't have, and it's ridiculous because you really don't need it. The other day, a lady came to me and said, I had gone to this ashram and I lost my watch. And she's moaning about it for so long. And why is she? So I asked her, I said, was it an expensive watch? No, it was an ordinary watch. Then what are you feeling so bad about? It was given to me as a gift by my mother. But your mother is there, no? The watch may have gone, the mother is there. So why don't you enjoy that? Instead of crying over the watch that was given by your mother. So something or the other we find to cry about. Something or the other we find to complain about. And this is what ruins our attitude of giving. So the moment you understand that you've been blessed with abundance, you will not complain. You won't look for fulfilling yourself through desires. And then you will have all the time in the world. And your mind will be free to focus on paying back to society, paying back to your family, paying back to the nation, paying back to that divine power that has blessed you with so many things. And this is what is outstanding about all givers. So let's take a brief look at takers versus givers. Number one, takers believe that the world has been created for my pleasure, and therefore I must help myself. Whereas givers believe that the world is meant for all of us, and the giver makes space for everyone. Takers are always functioning out of a sense of deprivation, and so they shamelessly go about grabbing things. Givers are acutely aware of the abundance that they have, and therefore they feel this irresistible urge to share. Tukaram, Sant Tukaram, he was always living in poverty. And one day his children wanted some sugar cane to eat. So he went out of his way to get himself some tiny job that he did. And with the money that he got for it, he bought a whole lot of sugar cane, thinking that he'd go home and give it to his children. Now, on the way home, every child who he passed by, he felt, the thing is, he did not feel a sense of separateness between his children and somebody else's children. So the moment any other child came and asked him for sugar cane, he went about distributing the sugar cane. Till in the end, when he went home, he had only one piece of sugar cane. But what is interesting is that one piece of sugar cane, he broke into two and gave them to his children, and his children enjoyed them thoroughly. So this is it. This sense of sharing is something that a giver automatically has. A taker is one who causes wanton destruction around him, to others, and most importantly to himself. Whereas a giver is one who functions in such a way that everybody prospers. He prospers, everyone else around him prospers. A taker always believes that he's right. A giver is one who's open to correction. A taker is always dissatisfied. A giver is always content. Take this example of Shabari and Sudama, two of the poorest people in the world, and yet they were supremely content. Takers are profoundly lonely. They feel this crushing sense of loneliness, even though they're in the company of people. Givers blend and harmonize with all, with any kind of people. Takers are insecure. They always feel that somebody else is going to grab what they have. A giver is never insecure, always secure. Now, this is the most important thing. When you are a taker, your desires increase, means you accumulate garbage. When you're a giver, your desires reduce. So, there are three kinds of actions that the Gita speaks of. The three kinds of actions are Niyatam karma, that's the highest quality of action. Niyatam karma means obligatory duty. Kamya karma, desire-ridden activity. And Nishiddha karma, prohibited action. And throughout the Gita, he keeps saying, the third chapter which speaks of karma yoga, he says, Niyatam kuru karmatvam. He exhorts us to perform obligatory duties. Now, the moment we speak of obligation, obligation is associated with drudgery, boredom. Oh, how boring. The other day, a young girl came to me and said, we have these youth programs. At one such program, a young girl said, I just mentioned, giving is not necessarily giving money. It could be giving your time, it could be giving your consideration. Like, for instance, when you go and spend time with your grandparents. So before I could complete my sentence, she said, but that's so boring. So, obligation is always associated with boredom and drudgery. And yet, fortunately for me, I didn't have to speak, but all the other youngsters said, but when you do it with the right attitude, spending time with your grandparent gives you so much pleasure. And another youngster said, but you don't realize how much your grandparents did for you when you were young. You don't realize that someday you are going to be in their place. And so, niyatam karma. If every one of us functions on our obligation, there will be no problems in society. There are problems today because all of us are functioning on desire, kamya karma, on whims and fancies, on likes and dislikes. I love this and I hate this. And so you do all the things that you love and you avoid all the things that you hate. When you function on desires, desires mount to such a level that you cannot fulfill them through ethical, normal methods. So you cross the line and perform actions that your own conscience revolts against. This is called Nishiddha karma. When you cross the line, then what happens? You get completely captivated like Sita did. Sita fell a prey to desire. And even when she fell a prey to desire for what? The golden fleeting deer. Deer represents sense objects which are golden, attractive, tantalizing, and fleeting, passing. So Lakshmana, who was kept there to protect her, she sent him thinking that Ram was in trouble. So even when he left against his wish, at her bidding, at her command, he drew 3 lines, and they were called this famous Lakshman Rekha. And this Lakshman Rekha is what you yourself think is the line that you should not cross under any circumstances. The line set by your own conscience. But when desire mounts within you, and you're unable to fulfill that desire, you cross that line. And when you cross the line, you You're a victim of Ravana, the 10-headed monster representing the 10 sense objects, the world. So this is the state of all of us. And the Gita helps you to gain mastery over yourself with your intellect and to gain mastery over the world with the same intellect. Now, the importance of the intellect is something that we don't realize. How many times, how many thoughts, how many actions are performed bypassing the intellect completely, not consulting the intellect at all. And these are the dangerous moments in your life. So, safety and security is something that we in India just don't understand. So, this intellect needs to be awakened. And when your intellect is awake, you begin to see things that you never saw before. You begin to see where you're going wrong, you begin to see what you need to do, you begin to see a whole new world when your intellect is awakened. And when your conscience is awakened, there's much, much more. And that's what the Gita is all about. Now, let's take a look at the entire 8th chapter, take an overview of that before we get on with the verses. The first 4 verses deal with Brahman, Atman, and the world, as we saw yesterday. And then 5 to 7 deals with the principle, as you think, so you become. Verse 5 says, he who remembers, anybody, the person who remembers me at the time of death will come to me. Verse 6 says, this which we'll do now, the same principle applies in the world. Whatever you think of at the time of death, that object or being you will obtain. And in 7 it concludes, beautiful verse that is, Tasmat, therefore, Sarveshu Kaleshu, at all times, remember me and fight. Remember me and fight, don't take it literally. You'll go home this evening and start fighting. Your family members will wonder where you got all this motivation to fight. Fight means act dynamically. So 5 to 7 deal with this principle, as you think, so you become. 8 to 14 deals with how to attain Brahman, the whole spiritual journey. 15 to 22, the 4th topic, deals with rebirth and beyond. And the last topic, 23 to 28, deals with the paths of return, non-return, and direct liberation. So for now, we'll continue with verse 6.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha.
O Kaunteya, Kaunteya means son of Kunti. One goes to whatever object one remembers at the end while leaving the body by constant thought of that object. So he is elaborating on this principle of as you think, so you become. The previous verse, in verse 5, he said, if you are constantly thinking of me means God, Atman, at the time of death. Now in verse 5 when he says death, he's not speaking of death of the body, he's speaking of the death of your entire personality, the mind and the intellect. You've purified your entire system of desires and you are constantly thinking of God. What will happen to such a person? He will get to the state of realization, which means no more birth. He doesn't specify that. He talks about rebirth later. Now in verse 6, see, he must have understood the complete look of this lost look on our faces when he speaks of verse 5. He who thinks of me comes to me, we're all out, spaced out. So he quickly comes to our level and he says, whatever object you think of, whatever it is that you think of, at the time of leaving the body, here he specifies, death means leaving the body, which signifies that there will be rebirth. You will get to that. Why? Because of constant thought. Now, in these two verses, he's speaking of death, which is unknown to us. But let's get back to our lives. Even within our lifetime, between birth and death, which is what we know, we don't know what's going to happen after death. During our lifetime, we see this functioning. Every moment of our life, when you move from one experience to the other, this movement is driven by what? Desire. At 6:30, all of us came here. Why? Because we shared the common desire of wanting to study and learn the Gita. Hopefully that's why you've come. Some come because the neighbor has come. But that apart. At 8 o'clock, this desire temporarily is whetted and you move. Where will you go? Wherever the next desire takes you. So some of us may go home. Some others might say, oh, I've had enough. 1.5 hours of Gita, I need to chill out. So you go out for dinner or whatever. Third person goes to a meeting. Oh, various possibilities are there. But what is true is that wherever you go is where your desire takes you. Not just desire, the resultant of all your desires. So what happens at 6:30, it doesn't mean that you don't have other desires. All other desires go into the background, and this strong desire to come here shifts the resultant, and that's how you're here. Like this, you go on right through your lifetime from experience to experience, driven by desire, driven by the resultant of all your desires put together. Right? Is that not true? Yeah. Now, at the time of death, what happens? You've only discarded the body, but the mind and intellect is still there. So where will you go next? There's no reason to believe that the same principle will not continue. And so, what he's saying is, whatever object one remembers at the end, he is not talking about one single thought at the time of death. What he means is the resultant of all your thoughts, desires, actions, everything put together at that moment is where you will go. In fact, the movement takes place because of that. The movement takes place because the present body, the present environment is not conducive for the fulfillment of that resultant desire, and so therefore it needs a change. Just as at 8 o'clock if you want dinner, this place is not conducive. You can't eat here. So it necessitates a change. Until 8 o'clock, this environment is conducive. So movement doesn't take place as long as these two don't happen. Means, number one, your resultant desire and the present body and environment, there is a disconnect. Therefore, there is movement. So this movement happens during your lifetime and it happens at death also. That's all that he's saying here. So, the point is, we are so careless about our thoughts. You entertain thoughts left, right, and center. Most of the thoughts we're not even aware of. If you were aware of the thoughts, if you were aware of your speech, what you say, how you say, with what attitude you say, what kind of thoughts go through your mind, you yourself will be aghast. The number of negative thoughts that go through our mind, the number of wrong attitudes that we have, all this is frightening. Is frightening because when you understand the law of karma, you know that every single thought you're going to have to pay for. Because every single thought determines the resultant. We're very careless. Therefore, the first step is be aware. And how can you be aware? With what are you aware? Intellect. The intellect is aware of the thoughts. And as you become aware of your present thoughts, then there is a commitment to change, to improve the quality of your thoughts. So what you do is fix a goal and work dedicatedly towards a higher goal, a more inclusive goal, And then you find that you are able to overcome your negativities, your faults, without even trying. Because what happens is all your thoughts are resting on the higher, and so the lower falls off. It no longer grips you. So this is what he's talking about. There's a story of a great Mahatma who diligently performed all his spiritual practices, and he was meditating on the banks of a river in the Himalayas, when a hunter came along and shot the mother deer. And the infant, she had just delivered the offspring. So the baby deer was left completely helpless. So this Mahatma, because of all the commotion that took place, he opened his eyes and saw the mother dead and the baby lying there. And so he did what anyone would naturally do, which is take care of the infant deer. But in the process, what happened is he got attached to that deer. So when he was sitting in meditation, instead of thinking of God, he was thinking of the deer. And so they said that what happened is, when he died, he was on the brink of realization. He had no other thought, no other attachment, but he unnecessarily formed an attachment to the deer. So the story goes, he had to go through one extra birth as a deer and exhaust that before he went to realization. Now, if this can happen to a person like that, what must be happening in our minds? This Pandora's box that is there. It's really frightening. And then when things go wrong in our lives, at least that must be taken as a wake-up call. So instead of getting depressed and crying over it and getting, waiting for others to sympathize with you and give you, self-pity and all the rest of it, what the Gita says is, at least have all right, you've performed negative actions and the result has come to you. At least have the courage to stand up to it. Don't sit there and get weak-kneed. This is what he's telling Arjuna. Arjuna is faced with a challenge in life, like all of us are faced with challenges. The more you think about, this is my challenge and I'm going under, of course you feel sorry for yourself. But look around you and you see other people facing much greater challenges than you. And when you look at them, you begin to understand that you're blessed because you went through much less trauma, much less suffering than many others. And you're grateful for what you've received and you spring back. And you learn from your experiences. You understand that when things go wrong in life, it's because I've thought wrongly in the past, acted wrongly in the past, felt wrongly in the past. Correct that. So these are all wake-up calls. But we don't treat it as a wake-up call. We get further embroiled in the same thing. And that's the problem. So work in harmony with, in obeisance with the law of karma is the message here. And then he concludes in the next verse, 7.
Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhya cha mayyarpita mano buddhihi mame vaishasya samshayam.
This is a brilliant verse. The conclusion that he draws over the last 3 verses, he says, Tasmat, therefore, this topic ends here. Sarveshu kaleshu, at all times, every single moment of your life. What must you do? Mam anusmara yudhyacha. Remember me and fight. Now, don't take this literally. He's not talking about remembering Krishna and fight. He says, remembering the spirit, Atman. Every one of us is composed of 2 distinct entities, matter and spirit. All our problems arise from the fact that we have wrongly identified with the matter and are completely disconnected with the spirit, which you need to correct. So all that you need to do is, how have you got entangled in the matter? Because of constant thinking of matter. Constantly our thoughts are going to us. I am the body, I am the mind, I am the intellect, and therefore we've got into this mess. how do you extricate yourself from this, is the method that he's giving here. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. It's the consistency that matters. So worship is not to be done once a week, visit to a temple. Not once a day, puja in your home, and that too, people don't do it now. Hurriedly you light a lamp saying, oh, I'm late for work. So what are you thinking of when you're lighting the lamp? Work. That's no use. You might as well not do it. So what he's saying is, he says he understands that all of us have obligations to perform, all of us have desires to fulfill, all of us have various activities that we've got entangled in the world. It is not feasible at this point to pull yourself out of there physically. And even if you do it, it's not helpful. What is important is, see, the law says, as you think, so you become, not as you act. So the clue here is, you can do what you like. Perform whatever action that your swadharma is. It doesn't matter. What matters is, where is your thought? So, mam anusmara yudhya means act dynamically. Act wholeheartedly. Act with your heart and soul. Whatever it is that you do, you should do with your heart and soul. If your heart is not in it, don't do it, because it doesn't help anyone. But whatever you do, remember me, that's the clue. Remember me means remember the spirit. And when you do that, Mai arpita mano buddhi, with mind and intellect absorbed in me, with mind and intellect surrendered to me. So what is to be surrendered? Not the body, the mind and intellect. He specifies it. The body must act. It has to act. And in what field will it act? According to your swadharma, according to your vasanas, you have to act. So if you're a carpenter, you must do carpentry. If you're a magician, you must perform magic shows. If you're, what else? Doctor, you must practice medicine. If you're an engineer, you must do whatever you need to do. But whatever it is that you do, remember the higher. Now, if you're not able to identify with Atman, with God, with the spirit, think of something beyond your selfish, self-centered interests. This is Karma Yoga. So, remember and act is the first step. And then when your system gets divested of desires, you become meditative by nature, and then what must you do? You must just sit and remember. That's meditation. So what is the difference between Karma Yoga and meditation? The commonality is remembering me. The difference is, at a lower stage in Karma Yoga, you are engaging your organs of action. In the latter stages, when you become contemplative and meditative, you are engaging your organs of perception. But the common factor is, remember me. Then what will happen? You will doubtless come to me alone. Spirituality is communicated by three distinct methods. Krishna uses all three. One is going back to the ancient sages and said, thus the ancient sages have said it, and therefore I am telling you. So you accept it because a great personality had said it. The second is clear, distinct, precise logic and reason given, which is throughout the Gita. The third is an emphatic assertion of truth. Assertion. And this is what he uses here. He says, you will doubtless come to me. There is no doubt about it. So, true worship is that which permeates every thought in the intellect, every feeling in the mind, every perception, every action. So therefore there is this prayer. Kayena vacha manasendrerva buddhatnyamavat prakriti svabhavat karomi yadyat sakalam parasmai narayana iti samarpayami. So whatever you do with the body, whatever you speak, whatever emotions you feel in the mind, whatever be your contact with the indriyas, the sense organs. If that continues, but you are able to offer all of that to Narayana, then you are performing worship, not random acts of worship. Most of the time, we engage in worship out of a sense of guilt. When you've performed wrong action, then you want to go running to Tirupati. When you performed wrong action, when you violated your own conscience, you want to go to Siddhivinayak. Or when you've met with some tragic circumstance, then you think of God. But under normal circumstances, nobody thinks of God. And these random one-off thoughts get drowned in the sea of materialistic thinking, so they're as good as not there. So the key here, the key words here is Sarveshu Kaleshu, at all times. How do you do that? Exactly like when you're driving a car, you perform so many other activities. You're talking to your neighbor, your co-passenger. You could be speaking on the cell phone, even though it's not allowed. You could be adjusting the air conditioning. You could be doing so many things. But while you're driving, there is one thing that your mind is focused on constantly, and that is road. If your attention goes off the road even for a split second, you've had it. Even if this momentary sneeze and your eyes shut involuntarily, anything can happen. So similarly, you need to drive in the journey of life with one aspect of your mind constantly focused on the higher, on that which enables you to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel emotions, think thoughts, and then you enjoy every moment of your life. And remember this, enjoyment lies precisely in this. If you're not able to do this, you can't enjoy any experience in life. Mam anusmara yudhyacha. So there are two ways of achieving this sarveshu kaleshu, mam anusmara. How do you remember something always? There are two methods. One is when you love someone, you constantly think of that person. Everything in life becomes a reminder. A toothbrush could remind you of the person. TV channel can remind you of the person. Anything and everything is a constant reminder of that person. That comes when there is love, when there is an emotional connection. So you could follow Bhakti Marga, the path of devotion, to remember, or it could be intellectual focus. When the person has a clear goal, like a cricketer now, especially a cricketer who's playing these matches here, his goal is to perform to the best of his ability. So he whatever he does, wherever he goes, whatever he speaks, one aspect of his attention is constantly anchored in the thought of cricket. It could be a musician, it could be a tabla player, it could be whatever it is. When you're dedicated to a particular goal, when your intellect is focused on a goal, the thinking, the anchorage is automatically there. So use either, ideally use both. When you use both, you're able to maintain this focus. Next verse, 8.
अभ्यासयोगयुक्तेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन्.
O Partha, son of Pritha, one goes to the supreme resplendent being by making the mind unwavering and steady by the practice of yoga and meditation. So, with this verse, you begin the third topic, how to attain this Brahman. In verse 7, he simply says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha. Just remember me and act. The question is how? How do you achieve this? So he gives the Abhyasa Yoga. There are two kinds of practices by which to make the mind steady and unwavering. See, the mind is unable to focus, to concentrate. Why? We've been here over an hour. Can you honestly say that you've been concentrating on what the subject is right through this 1 hour? No. What did you say? 99%. You're being very optimistic. You're not able to. Even though you want to concentrate, you're not able to. Obviously, you want to concentrate. Why would you come here if you didn't want to concentrate? The mind goes all over the place. Where does the mind go? I'm not asking, desires. Wherever you have a desire. So if you have a desire for home, the mind will go home. If you have a desire for going to the club, the mind will go there. If you have a desire for a movie, it will go there. And the mind is full of desires. So the mind is constantly what they call as asthira and chanchala. It's constantly flitting from place to place. And even at a given point is restless. So the whole spiritual practice is to get it steady, focused, unwavering. There are two methods by which to make it steady and unwavering. The first is this mind that is going all over the place because of desires, you bring it back from the world to the seat of meditation, relative calm, relative control of the mind. And this is done by the practices of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga. This is called Abhyasa Yoga. The second is, having made the mind tranquil and controlled, you give it a point of meditation, you give it a mantra to repeat. Even then the mind will slip from the mantra. So when the mind slips from the mantra, even a controlled, prepared mind slips. So when it slips, you bring it back to the point of concentration. This is called Anuchintan meditation. So the Abhyasa Yoga are various disciplines. One way of looking at it is the three yogas of Karma Yoga with the body, Bhakti Yoga with the mind, Jnana Yoga with the intellect is what we're taking a look at. But there's another way of looking at it, which is called Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga means 8 disciplines. For those of you who are interested, the 8 disciplines are Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and at the end of it all, you reach the state of Samadhi, which is realization. So what are these 8 disciplines? Yama is self-restraint. It is a general strength of the intellect that you develop with which you are able to control all your transactions with the world. In order to achieve this general restraint, you need to perform what is known as niyama. Niyama is specific religious practices or observances that you follow in order to strengthen that intellect. And like, for instance, fast, tapa, penance, vrata, religious vows, upavas is fast, etc. There are 10 niyamas and there are 10 yamas. I'm not getting into these details because you'll forget. The third is asana. Asana means you train your physical body. The Annamaya Kosha is taken care of. You see, there are 5 sheaths that cover Atman. The outermost is the food sheath. It's called Annamaya Kosha, your physical body. So to do anything in life, you've got to be in the pink of health. If you're an ICU patient, what spiritual practice are you going to perform? So the first step is to get your body absolutely fit. And how do you do that? Exercise the body. So with asanas, you tune up your physical body, you get it to absolutely top condition. Next, pranayama is regulation of the pranamaya kosha, which means your physiological activities, your metabolic rate, everything has to be in good condition. Exactly what you do with a car. If you're embarking on a long journey, what do? You tune up the car in such a way that it doesn't break down. That's what you're doing. You're tuning up your personality so that it doesn't break down on this long and arduous journey to realization. Next is pratyahara, your mind, which is going in different directions. You help it, you withdraw it from its preoccupations with the world and make it calm and available to you. The next is dharana. Now, pratyahara is where you give it a point of devotion. Your emotions are directed towards one higher entity, and the moment your emotions are directed towards one thing, it automatically does not slip into lower attractions. Dharana is where Vijnanamaya Kosha, your gross intellect, is tuned up. Dharana is concentration. And then comes dhyana, which is getting your subtle intellect tuned up. Dhyana is where is meditation. And if you do all this in the right proportions, your personality is ready to take off into the flights of realization, which is called samadhi. So all of this put together is what he is referring to as abhyasa yoga and anuchintayan meditation. It's amazing how the entire spiritual practice is encapsulated in one verse, the whole thing. So, converge the mind to that which is the root, the base of all your experiences, is what he's saying. Once you do all these, you're able to constantly think, focus on that divine power that is operating within you, outside of you, every interaction. And if you are able to think of it even for a few moments in the day, you find that you're so energetic, you're so exhilarated, you're so cheerful, at least for that time. Then you might slump into depression again, or your normal self. But the few moments when you connect with the higher is so invigorating. And once you taste it, then you don't need to be reminded. You'll automatically take to it. Problem is that we're so steeped in material pursuits that you're not even lifting yourself up. You're not even giving yourself a chance to think of the higher. And that's all that the Gita is trying to do. Next verse, 9.
Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Anoraniya Samanusmaredyah Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat.
This verse gives pointers, indicators to Brahman. This verse is meant for contemplation, preparing the mind for meditation. So what he's saying here is, one who meditates on the all-knowing, the ancient, the all-ruler, smaller than the smallest, sustainer of all, of inconceivable form, self-luminous like the sun, beyond darkness. And then he continues to the 10th verse. But what he's describing here is, what is that resplendent being? So far, he's just been referring to Brahman. But Brahman is something that we don't understand. Even literally, Brahman means, Bruhat means great, humongous is the word, vast. But since we don't know what it is, how are you going to think of something that you don't know? So he has to give some indication of what that entity is that we need to think about. And these indicators cannot be captured by the intellect. The fundamental thing is Brahman is beyond perception. You can't see God, you can't hear God, you can't taste, smell, touch God. You can't feel God with your emotions. You can't conceive God with your intellect. And yet, they've come out with such brilliant indicators that all of them put together give you some idea of what it must be like. So, these indicators are Kavim. Kavi literally means poet. What is interesting is that those people who reach the state of realization were able to brilliantly combine aesthetics with ethics. And it is true. As a person evolves, one of the things that happens is the refinement sets in. So the crudeness and the jarring behavior, conduct, all that drops. And you become a highly refined, highly attractive personality, like Krishna is described as an irresistible, charming personality that he had. So much so that anyone who came in contact with him went completely gaga over. This is the description of Krishna. So, realized soul is a kavi. How does he express himself? He beautifully blends poetry with philosophy so that it is endearing, so that it is attractive to us. You know, any literature for that matter, even if it is prose, has an element of poetry in it. The only form of literature that is completely devoid of poetry is the kind of language that you hear in courtrooms, legal language. Yeah, that's why it's so boring. You can't read it. If you were to read one legal letter, by the end of it, you feel like putting it down. So, here is a philosophy, here is a message that immediately endears itself to you because of this exquisite poetry that there is in it. So, realized souls were poets. But Kavim literally means all-knowing, that pure consciousness which enables you to know whatever it is that you know. Puranam, ancient. There are two ways of looking at it. One is what Shankaracharya called as Pura api nava eva iti puranaha, means it is ancient and yet it is ever fresh. Any number of times you read the Gita, any number of times you approach this subject, it reaches out to you, it touches you. It appears fresh. This is the quality of it, because it is the truth. So, Puranam means that, but also Puranam philosophically, intellectually, it means beyond, it's ancient because it's beyond time. Time was born with the second experience. Time is the interval between two experiences. But Atman was present even before the first experience. Therefore, it is poetically referred to as ancient, before time. Anushasitaram. The law of causation functions in the world. Everything that happens in the world is governed by a set of laws, set in place beautifully. Never does the law falter. Have you ever heard of a person jumping out of the 20th floor and going floating? No. The law of gravity functions meticulously all the time. So also all the other laws. So there seems to be a governor. Brahman, God, is that entity which has put all the laws in place and governs all the laws. Ruler, all ruler. A good administrator is one who doesn't need to get after people. A good administrator is one in whose presence everything functions beautifully. Isn't that true? And God is the best administrator because Brahman doesn't have to make his presence felt. In Brahman's presence, all the laws function meticulously. Anoraniyam sama, minuter than the minute, smaller than the smallest. You know, in the Upanishads particularly, in describing Brahman, they give opposites. On the one hand, they say larger than the largest and smaller than the smallest. Which means what? It's all pervading. It pervades every aspect of the universe exactly like butter pervades every particle of milk. This is a brilliant analogy that they give throughout the scriptures. In fact, the life of Krishna itself is an indicator. Sarvasya dhataram, supporter of all. It supports everything, just as gold supports all ornaments, the ocean supports all waves, the rope supports the snake that you see, the sand supports the mirage. Similarly, Brahman supports everything in the universe. Achintya Rupam, formless. It is impossible to capture Brahman with the intellect, it's beyond the intellect. Aditya Varnam, self-effulgent, brilliant. In the Upanishad, they show the young student, Ishavasya Upanishad, reaching the state of realization, and he dramatizes it by saying, take the cover off this brilliant sun. So, Atman, Brahman is always equated to light. That's why you do the Gayatri mantra at sunrise. Self-effulgent means Atman does not need any other source of light or knowledge to understand it. It illumines it just as the sun illumines itself, Atman illumines itself. And tamasap parastat, beyond darkness, beyond ignorance. Why he says beyond ignorance is because Atman is that knowing principle which illumines both what you know as well as what you don't know. You might say confidently, I know English. With as emphatically you will say, I do not know Persian. Unless there is someone here who knows Persian. Right? So, it is that entity in you which is aware of what you know. It also illumines what you don't know. Tamasa parastat. And all this is you. So when you look at all these, Kavim, Puranam, Anushasitaram, you don't think of something way beyond the clouds, beyond the galaxies. This, what he's describing, is me. And that floors you completely. Okay? So what are the take-home points? What are the points that you've learned from this hour and a half here? Number one, taking versus giving. I would seriously recommend that every one of us goes home today and thinks over it, reflects over it, and experiments with it. And then you come to the conclusion what principle you must follow. Niyatam karma, obligatory duty. The entire country for centuries together has eulogized Niyatam karma, obligatory duty. And every aspect of Indian life is permeated with this fragrance of obligatory duty. And if you want to prosper, if you want the country to prosper, if you want the world to be blessed, you have to get back to Niyatam karma, obligatory duty. So fix a goal, think of that goal constantly, sarveshu kaleshu, but act in the world, perform your obligation. This is a brilliant technique by which you extricate yourself from attachment to the world and get anchored in the self. Consistency is important, is the most important factor. And this is one thing that we as Indians don't seem to have. Inconsistency. And the last is Abhyasa Yoga. When you perform this Abhyasa Yoga, which are Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or the Ashtanga Yoga that we spoke of, your mind becomes tranquil and it is ready for meditation.